My husband returned to the cabin with the one he hid. 21 years. So I revealed what I saved for years. For 21 years, I believed almost every word my husband said, every business trip, every late-night excuse, every moment he claimed to be busy with work or helping an old friend. I played the role of trusting wife so convincingly that I almost believed it myself. But on the night we returned to our old mountain cabin for what should have been a romantic anniversary weekend, he brought her, the woman he had hidden in the shadows of his life for over 2 decades, introducing her as a surprise guest. With the audacity of a man who thought I'd never figure anything out, he expected me to break down, to crumble in shock and humiliation, to fall apart like women do in movies when they discover their husband's betrayal. Instead, I calmly reached into my bag and pulled out what I had quietly, methodically collected all these years. The complete, undeniable, absolutely devastating truth. And when I finally revealed what I'd been saving, the night turned in a direction he never imagined in his worst nightmares. But before I tell you about the 21-year affair I pretended not to know about and the evidence I've been collecting like a woman possessed, you need to do 3 things right now. Slam that subscribe button like it personally offended you. Smash that like button until your finger hurts. And drop a comment telling me if you've ever known about a partner's lies and just waited for the perfect moment to destroy them. Because this story is about patience, planning, and the sweetest revenge that's ever been served at a rustic mountain cabin. And trust me, you're going to want to hear every single word. My name is Margaret, I'm 58 years old, and 3 months ago at our mountain cabin, I finally revealed to my husband of 23 years that I'd known about his affair for the last 21 of them. But that's getting ahead of the story, and the backstory is where all the really good details live. So let me take you back to where this all began. I met my husband Charles when I was 33 years old, late bloomer in the marriage department, but I'd been focused on building my career as a financial analyst and hadn't prioritized relationships. Charles was 40, divorced, successful in commercial real estate, charming in that smooth way men who've been through one marriage tend to be. He knew how to say the right things, do the romantic gestures, play the part of devoted partner. We dated for 2 years, got married, and for those first 2 years of marriage, everything seemed genuinely good. We bought a mountain cabin together in the 2nd year of our marriage, a beautiful A-frame about 3 hours from the city, nestled in the woods with a view of the lake. It was supposed to be our retreat, the place we'd escape to for anniversaries and romantic weekends away from the demands of our careers. We spent our 2nd anniversary there, just the 2 of us, drinking wine by the fireplace and talking about maybe starting a family. That was the last purely happy memory I have of that cabin. Right after that anniversary trip, things started to shift. Charles began traveling more for work, real estate deals in other cities, property inspections that required overnight trips, client meetings that kept him away for days at a time. I didn't question it initially because Charles had always traveled for work, and commercial real estate is genuinely demanding. But the frequency increased dramatically. What had been maybe once a month became once a week. He'd leave Thursday afternoon and not return until Sunday evening. Monday through Wednesday he'd be home, then gone again. About 4 months into this new pattern, I started noticing other things. Charles would be on his phone constantly, but would tilt the screen away from me. He'd take calls in another room. He started a separate credit card that statements for didn't come to our house. He claimed it was for business expenses that he'd expense back to his company, which seemed plausible enough. He bought new cologne, started dressing better, seemed to care more about his appearance than he had in the first 2 years of our marriage. I'm a financial analyst. My entire career is built on noticing patterns in data that other people miss. And the pattern I was seeing in my husband's behavior had a very obvious conclusion. Charles was having an affair. So I did what any woman with resources and trust issues would do. I hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus. He came highly recommended, and he was expensive enough that I knew he'd be thorough. I gave him a month to follow Charles and document everything. What Marcus discovered was both exactly what I expected and somehow worse. Charles was having an affair, but not with some young secretary or a woman he'd met in a hotel bar during his travels. He was having an affair with his ex-wife, Elena, the woman he'd divorced 5 years before he even met me. They'd reconnected shortly after our 2nd anniversary, and had been seeing each other every single week since. Charles would leave Thursday afternoons and go to Elena's house in a city 2 hours away. He'd spend Thursday night through Sunday morning with her, then come home to me Sunday evening. Marcus had photos of them together, grocery shopping like a normal couple, walking hand in hand through parks, sitting on her porch drinking coffee in the mornings. He had credit card records showing Charles was paying for repairs on Elena's house, buying her gifts, taking her to restaurants. He had hotel receipts from trips where Charles had claimed to be traveling for work, but was actually on vacation with Elena. 21 years of documented double life, all neatly organized in a file that Marcus handed to me with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "I know this isn't what you wanted to find." Though in my experience, when someone hires me, they usually already know the truth. They just need the proof. He was right. I'd known. Deep down, I'd known for months. But seeing it documented, seeing photographic evidence of my husband building a whole separate life with another woman, hit differently than just suspecting. Here's where my response probably differs from what most people would do. I didn't immediately confront Charles. I didn't throw the photos at him when he came home from his next business trip. I didn't scream or cry or dramatically kick him out. Instead, I sat in my home office, looking at Marcus's file, and I thought about my options strategically. I was 37 years old. I'd been married for 2 years with Charles for 4 total. We didn't have children. My career was solid and I was financially independent. I could absolutely divorce him, take him for everything he had in the settlement, and move on with my life. That was option 1, and it was perfectly valid. But then I thought about something else. I thought about Charles's smug confidence that I'd never figure out what he was doing. I thought about how he must laugh with Elena about how naive I was, how easy I was to deceive. I thought about how he'd probably been planning this from the beginning, marry the stable, successful woman for appearance's sake, while maintaining his real relationship with his ex-wife in secret. And I got angry. Not sad, not hurt, angry. And when I get angry, I don't get emotional. I get calculating. I decided on a different approach. I would let Charles continue his double life, but I would document everything. I would build a case so thorough, so comprehensive, so absolutely airtight, that when I eventually decided to pull the trigger on this marriage, he would have no defense, no sympathy, no way to spin himself as anything other than the lying, cheating, manipulative fraud he was. And more importantly, I would choose the exact moment of maximum impact to reveal what I knew. So for the next 21 years, yes, you heard that right, 21 years, I played the role of oblivious wife while systematically documenting my husband's affair. I kept Marcus on retainer, having him follow Charles periodically to update the evidence file. I tracked every unexplained expense, every suspicious trip, every lie about his whereabouts. I created a spreadsheet, because I'm a financial analyst, and of course I created a spreadsheet, cataloging every instance of deception I could identify. But I also did something else. I built my own financial fortress. I advanced in my career, eventually becoming a senior vice president at my firm. I maxed out my retirement contributions every year. I bought investment properties in my name only, using inheritance money from my parents. I created separate bank accounts Charles didn't know about. I made sure that when I eventually left this marriage, I'd be leaving from a position of absolute financial security. You might be wondering why I stayed so long. Fair question. Part of it was strategic. The longer the affair continued, the more damning the evidence, the better my position in divorce court. But part of it was also psychological. I wanted Charles to feel completely secure in his deception. I wanted him to believe he'd gotten away with it so completely that he'd never suspect I knew. Because the revelation would be so much more devastating if it came after years of him thinking he was smarter than me. During those 21 years, Charles maintained his pattern almost like clockwork. Thursday through Sunday with Elena, Monday through Wednesday with me. He'd occasionally miss a week if I insisted we do something together, but those instances were rare. He kept up appearances beautifully at home. He was attentive enough to not raise suspicions, distant enough that I never pushed for real intimacy. We became roommates who occasionally had sex, maintaining the facade of marriage while living essentially separate lives. The cabin sat mostly unused during these years. Charles would make excuses about being too busy to go, about work commitments that prevented weekend getaways. I never pushed it because I knew exactly why he didn't want to go. Weekends were his time with Elena, and a weekend at the cabin with me would cut into his other life. But last year, as our 23rd anniversary approached, I decided it was time. 21 years of documented infidelity was enough. I'd built my fortress, secured my finances, and collected enough evidence to bury Charles in any divorce proceeding. It was time to choose my moment. I suggested we spend our anniversary at the cabin, just like we'd done for our second anniversary 21 years ago. A return to where we were happiest, I said, laying it on thick. Charles looked uncomfortable but agreed, probably because refusing would have seemed suspicious after I'd played the dutiful wife for 2 decades. Then I did something bold. I said, "Why don't you invite Elena to join us? I know you two have stayed close over the years, and it might be nice to have another couple there." I said this casually, like I was suggesting we invite any old friend, watching Charles's face carefully for his reaction. He went pale, actually pale. "Elena, why would we invite my ex-wife to our anniversary celebration?" "Because you've been spending every weekend with her for 21 years, I said, still casual, like I was commenting on the weather. "And I thought it might be nice to finally meet the woman who's been such a significant part of your life." The silence that followed was deafening. Charles stood there frozen, his brain clearly trying to process what I'd just said and figure out if I was joking or testing him, or if I actually knew. "I don't know what you're talking about," he finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Of course you do," I replied pleasantly. "You leave every Thursday afternoon and spend the next 3 days with Elena. You've been doing it since 4 months after our second anniversary. You've been maintaining 2 households, 2 relationships, 2 complete lives for over 2 decades, and you've done it very successfully. I'll give you that. Most men can't keep a secret that long without slipping up." Charles looked like he might be sick. "How long have you known?" "Since the beginning. Well, since 4 months after it started. I hired a private investigator 21 years ago. I've known everything, Charles. Every trip, every lie, every moment you've spent with her. I've documented all of it." "Then why didn't you say anything? Why stay married to me if you knew?" "Because I was building my case," I said simply, "and because I wanted to choose the moment of revelation. Which brings me back to my suggestion. Invite Elena to the cabin for our anniversary. Let's all be honest with each other for the first time in 23 years. To my surprise, Charles actually did it. Maybe he was in shock. Maybe he realized there was no point in denying it anymore. Maybe he thought if he complied, there was some way to salvage the situation. He called Elena, and after what I imagine was a very awkward conversation, she agreed to come to the cabin. So we all 3 drove up to the mountain cabin, separately, because that would have been too awkward even for this bizarre situation. Charles and I arrived first Friday afternoon. Elena showed up an hour later, looking nervous and confused, clearly not fully understanding why she'd been invited to her ex-husband's anniversary celebration with his current wife. The 3 of us sat in the cabin's living room, the same room where Charles and I had celebrated our second anniversary 21 years ago, and I finally revealed everything I'd been collecting all these years. I pulled out my laptop and a thick folder I'd brought specifically for this moment. "Elena," I said, "I want to show you something. This is a comprehensive documentation of my husband's lies over the past 21 years. I opened the folder and started laying out printed evidence on the coffee table. Photos of Charles and Elena together, dated and cataloged. Credit card statements showing purchases he'd made for her. Hotel receipts from business trips that were actually vacations they'd taken together. Phone records showing thousands of calls between them. A spreadsheet I'd created tracking every lie Charles had told me about his whereabouts, with corresponding evidence showing where he actually was. I've known about your relationship with Charles for 21 years, I told Elena. I've documented every instance of infidelity, every lie he's told to maintain his double life, every penny of marital assets he's spent on you. Elena looked horrified, staring at the evidence spread across the table. Charles looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "Why?" Elena finally asked. "Why document all of this and say nothing?" "Because I wanted both of you to understand something," I said. "Charles, you thought you were so clever, maintaining 2 relationships without either of us figuring it out. You thought I was naive, trusting, too stupid to see what was happening right in front of me. And Elena, you thought you were getting the man you never stopped loving, that you were somehow special enough to warrant all this elaborate deception. I pulled out another folder. But here's what you both missed. While Charles was busy living his double life, I was building my own fortress. I'm now a senior vice president earning 3 times what I made when we got married. I own 4 investment properties in my name alone. I have retirement accounts Charles has no claim to. I've transferred significant assets into protected trusts. And I've spent 21 years documenting every way Charles has violated our marriage. I slid a different set of papers across the table. These are divorce papers. I'm filing on grounds of adultery with 21 years of evidence to support it. My attorney estimates that given the length and extent of Charles's deception, the deliberate deception of marital assets, and the documented infidelity, I'll receive a settlement that leaves Charles with approximately 30% of our combined assets. Charles found his voice. You've been planning this for 21 years? You've stayed married to me, knowing about Elena, just to build a divorce case? Yes, I said simply. I decided a long time ago that when I left this marriage, I'd leave on my terms, from a position of strength, with everything documented so thoroughly that you'd have no defense. And I chose this moment, our anniversary, at the cabin where we celebrated before your affair started, to reveal it all, because I wanted the symbolic weight of returning to where we began, before I end it definitively. Elena was crying now. I didn't know you knew. Charles told me you were cold, distant, that the marriage was basically over anyway. He said he stayed with you out of obligation, but his real life was with me. Of course he did, I said, because Charles is fundamentally a coward who needed to justify his behavior to both of us. He couldn't admit to you that he was actively maintaining a marriage with me, and he couldn't admit to me that he was actively maintaining a relationship with you. So he lied to us both, just in different ways. I stood up. Here's what happens now. I'm leaving the cabin and driving home. You two can stay here and figure out your relationship without me as the secret third party. Charles, my attorney will be in contact Monday morning to begin divorce proceedings. Elena, I don't blame you entirely. Charles is the one who made vows to me, not you. But you should know that the man you've been with for 21 years is someone who's capable of lying to everyone in his life simultaneously for decades. Think carefully about whether that's someone you want to build a future with. Wait, Charles said. We should talk about this. Maybe we can work something out. Negotiate the settlement. There's nothing to negotiate, I interrupted. You spent 21 years making choices. Now I'm making mine. You chose to have an affair. I chose to document it and build an airtight case. You chose to lie. I chose to wait for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. Your choices are done. These are mine. I packed my overnight bag, which I'd barely unpacked anyway since I'd known this weekend wasn't actually about reconciliation. I walked out to my car, leaving Charles and Elena sitting in stunned silence surrounded by 21 years of documented evidence of their affair. The divorce is proceeding exactly as my attorney predicted. Charles tried initially to fight some of the settlement terms, but when faced with 21 years of affair documentation and evidence that he'd deliberately hidden assets and spent marital funds on another woman, his attorney advised him to accept the terms. I'll end up with the house, most of our investments, and a significant portion of his retirement accounts. Charles will end up with about 30% of what we built together, which seems fair, given that he only lived about 30% of his life with me anyway. Elena stopped calling Charles about 2 weeks after the cabin revelation. Turns out, when your relationship is based on secret weekends and the excitement of forbidden romance, it doesn't necessarily hold up well when it becomes public, and you realize the man you've been with is capable of deceiving everyone around him for decades. Last I heard, Charles is living in a small apartment, trying to rebuild his life without either of the women he'd been juggling for 21 years. People ask me if I regret spending 21 years of my life in a marriage where I knew my husband was cheating. The answer is no. Those 21 years weren't wasted. They were strategic. I used that time to build wealth, security, and an unbeatable legal position. Could I have left sooner? Yes. Would it have worked out as well for me? Probably not. I left on my terms, with my finances protected, and with the satisfaction of revealing at the perfect moment that I'd known all along. So, there's the story of how my husband brought his 21-year affair partner to our anniversary cabin, and I revealed the 21 years of evidence I'd been collecting. If you loved this tale of long-term planning and strategic revenge, hit that subscribe button, smash that like, and comment telling me, would you have confronted immediately or played the long game? This is Margaret, reminding you that patience isn't just a virtue, it's a weapon when used correctly. Thanks for watching.